Good morning and welcome. Day 3 of SciBoss, and I know it's been a very active SciBoss for many individuals. I've spoken to many of my colleagues who have attended multiple sessions. We've had many that have overflowing people that are there, as well as I've had some colleagues say that they've done at least 20,000 steps now that we all have those Fitbits throughout the day, which makes us all quite tired. But I'm hoping that Day 3 of SciBoss is proving to be an exceptional experience and delivering on all of your expectations and objectives for your time here. I would also say that yesterday, as we kicked off the diversity stream for SciBoss, it was one of our first. SciBoss delivers lots of firsts, lots of new product development. As you can see, even within a tribe, a lot of startups and challenges that are there. But what was important about 2015 here in Singapore was that we had created a dedicated stream to talk about diversity and its importance in our business factors in everything that we do. In such a changing environment, it has become an imperative for us to be able to move forward and be successful in our organizations, from financial performance to innovation to really looking at things that it might be even socially responsible. Yesterday, we kicked off our diversity session with sometimes an uncomfortable conversation around unconscious bias. And for myself personally, having gone through that session a number of times in my career, I can tell you it's quite humbling, even that very first time. I will admit to you today that when I did do that, the first time I thought, well, not necessarily for me. I felt that I already had very diverse teams, both culturally, geography, from a gender perspective. But when I sat through that, I realized what it did mean about unconscious bias and how it is that we come to decisions. And now it has made me a stronger leader because I challenge myself in my thinking throughout that. When we look at today's session, it's a journey that's going to inspire you. And what I love about today's session is that we're going to take the topic of diversity and we're going to expand upon it. It isn't necessarily just about gender. It's not just about culture. It's really about how it is that we are going to look at it as an opportunity. When I looked at the McKinsey report recently, it did say that when you have gender diversity within your organization, you're 15% more likely to outperform your peers. And in fact, if you have ethnically diverse teams, you're 35% more likely to outperform your peers. And even though we have overwhelming evidence from a financial performance perspective, we still struggle in many organizations in order to bring diversity home. When we look at it today in today's session with James Sun, he looks at really as a strategic business asset. It's a differentiator in your businesses, in your communities, a reflection of who it is that you are doing from a business partner perspective and those communities that you serve. But also, in his own words, it's an offensive weapon. James Sun is a proven technology entrepreneur with international media experience, hosted his own television show, frequent TEDx speaker, radio show analyst, and magazine publisher. James' Sun family immigrated to the United States when he was 3 years old with $35 in their name. They arrived in Los Angeles with no money and no contacts, and didn't even speak the English language. They had to survive through sheer determination, hard work, and hope. And as the only Asian American family in their neighborhood where they settled down, James's family faced much racism. James can recall moments when their car tires were slashed and racist remarks were painted on their home. James has his own hit program called Sun Tzu War on Business, which was aired in over 20 countries, where he turned around 13 companies in 18 months. James was also the first Asian male to land a spot on Donald Trump's reality show, The Apprentice. Asian American men have a very difficult time landing a major role on primetime television in the United States, but James broke the barrier. Out of 800,000 applicants, he was the successful candidate and became the only Asian finalist in the history of the show. He's the founder and CEO of Perk, a mobile loyalty and payments application for small, medium-sized businesses, which was successfully acquired by one of the largest payment companies in the U.S. Previous to this, James has built over $200 million of startup enterprise value in 3 years in 3 different continents, including an online education venture connecting Chinese students with English teachers. He is currently the owner of dreambeans.com, the highest traffic site bringing Korean drama content to the English-speaking world. James graduated cum laude with a computer information systems degree from the University of Washington, and he was recently selected in the Wondrous 100 Alumni Award. Top 100 alumni, which included prominent individuals like Bill Gates Sr. and Kenny G. During his college years, he started an investment trading company during his freshman year with $10,000 and became a multi-millionaire by the time he graduated as a senior. Please welcome James Sun.
That bio was way too long, so I apologize about that. It's great to be here today and to talk about this topic of diversity, and it's an exciting topic for me. But before we begin on that topic, a lot of people ask me, so James, what is the secret to success? There's not one person that doesn't want to know that. They all want to know, what is the secret to success, whether it's business or in life? And I don't have it 100% figured out. However, one thing that I know is an absolute common denominator to succeeding is managing dynamic changes. In the startup world that we're in, or I'm in, if you cannot change your business model 25 times or your features 100 times, then you're not actually going with the movement of the market. So change is something that is very difficult to manage. If you think about our human nature, we don't like to change. We put on one shoe before the other all the time. When you sit in a classroom or a boardroom, you end up sitting in the same chair all the time. We don't like change, and there's a reason for that. Now, the world is changing today. I mean, I look around the room today, and we see, I'm sorry, how old are you guys? What grade are you guys in? So just speak up. Like high school? Junior high?
What grade are they in?
Second year in high school? Wow.
Secondary school.
Secondary school. All the way to, I'm not going to pick on the oldest person, don't worry. But I mean, change is happening here. You can never imagine that we would have a conference in the fintech and financial world, and we're talking about diversity. So let's talk about change a little bit, but before we go there, I want to tell you a little story. So I know this gentleman, his name is Satoshi Nakajima, and he was the architect of Windows 95. I'm from Seattle and Los Angeles, so I know a lot of Microsoft guys. And he was there, and he's very, very famous now in Japan for architecting one of the best software programs at the time, which was 95. And after he left Microsoft, he left with like $300 million, and he wanted to actually do a startup. And so he pitched a venture capital firm. I won't mention the name of it. And it was him and another company and another company. So there are 3 companies that were pitching this VC firm. They're all at about the same stage in the product development and in the business model. Now, Satoshi Nakajima is Japanese American. He does have a little bit of an accent when he speaks English. The other 2 companies were run by Caucasian folks in America that had no accent. So we think there should be no hidden bias, and it doesn't exist, right? Even at this level, at a venture capital level, where we're talking about real hard dollars, there shouldn't be, and we wouldn't expect a hidden bias to actually affect the formula of success of one of these ventures. So he gives the presentation. They offer him a term sheet. They said, we will invest in your company, and we will value you at a pre-money of $6 million. Not bad for where he's at, for $6 million. They said, we'll give you $2.5 million at a $6 million valuation. Fantastic. Second company presents. They get a $15 million valuation. So the VC says, we will give you $5 million at a $15 million pre-money valuation. Third company, $19 million. So Satoshi Nakajima, after he found this out later, by the way, analyzed why this was happening. He asked the other founders exactly what stage they were at, what was different about their company versus his. They're all enterprise software. And I know there's a lot of different factors that go into this valuation model, but he recognized and realized it was because he was Japanese American and he couldn't present with such enthusiasm and in such salesmanship. The Japanese culture presents in a different way. He's more about the data. He's kind of a coder, so he just looks at his computer while he's presenting. And so that completely impacted his ability to get a higher valuation. In the VC world, not to pick on them too much, less than 3.5% of billions of dollars are going to female CEOs. That's a problem. There's a lot more female entrepreneurs than 3%. But less than 3.5% of venture funding is going to female CEOs. So we have to recognize that we've come a long ways, but we still have a lot more to go. And when the industries like yours could understand that, and we could actually have these conversations, then I think we start seeing a little bit of a change. So let's talk about this concept of change a little bit. The changing face of the consumer, globalization effect on diversity. As we look in this room, none of us are probably from the same background. We come from different countries, different cultures, different families, and we bring something to society and our own companies in the dynamics, and we're not all the same. It used to be where we started thinking about the consumer and diversity very separately. So my contention today and my argument today is because of globalization, if you're not paying attention to diversity, you're actually going to be behind. The world is changing, and basically your companies will be behind if your executives are not looking at it this way. And we're gonna dive deep into this. So it's not just a very high level thing we're talking about. We'll dive very deep. But I'm telling you that if companies do not embrace this as a strategic investment and as an offensive weapon, the companies will be behind. Here's a little slideshow. We see right here on the left, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, great player. And on the right, it's Jeremy Lin. And I know he doesn't play for the Knicks anymore, but I'm not sure if many of you are anyone from the US here? So about a very small percentage, okay? I'm from the US, so I've got kind of a US bent and a US hidden bias, but I'll make it very unhidden. And so please understand that I've got a US perspective as I talk about all of this. But I think it's also interesting where whenever I speak at international conferences, they do like to hear from a US perspective as well. And so when Jeremy Lin was very popular, it was called Linsanity. Literally, you cannot turn on the television and not see something about Jeremy Lin and what he was doing in the NBA, because he was the first Asian player that actually was not a center like Yao Ming, but he was actually a good and solid, skilled scorer. And he was getting a ton of press in the United States. Funny thing is, a lot of my African American friends, and by the way, one thing about me, I'm not political. I'm not going to be politically sensitive. I just say it how it is because I think there's a whole point to this. We need to have the conversations that we are different, right? So my African American friends contact me, and I've got a lot of them, and some of them play professional sports. They go, James, what's going on with this guy? I go, what do you mean? They go, this Jeremy Lin guy said, well, when Kobe Bryant was doing really well, you didn't call me and ask me about Kobe Bryant. They go, yeah, but you're Asian. Yeah, I know I'm Asian. So there's associations that we make, and they were so surprised that this guy, Jeremy Lin, was doing so well in basketball. Another slide. This is a Miss Universe or Miss USA competition. And in the US, there was kind of this misnomer that there was no way a non-Caucasian that's not blonde and blue-eyed would win the competition. That was kind of the trend that was happening early on in the pageant days. And now we have the first Asian American that won was in actually 1962. The first Hispanic that won was in 85, first African American in 1990, and then in 2010, the first Middle Eastern female won the competition. So even in the US, things are moving. Now, are they moving fast enough? Well, we'll get to that, but they are moving. Here's another slide. Why are you guys laughing? Now, this gentleman is getting a lot of press lately, right? He's, in case you're not reading the newspaper, he's running for president of the United States. And he's in the lead. He's in the lead on the Republican Party still. Unbelievable, right? I have so many stories about Donald Trump, it's not even funny. But I'll start with this one. When he started the Trump enterprise, right? He owns real estate, basically. He always thought, and he told me this, he always thought that he was going to put Trump Jr., which is Don Jr., in charge of his empire. And he would be kind of the next in the legacy in the family. I'll tell you what, Don Jr. is not going to be the next Donald Trump for the Trump enterprise. When and if it happens, it's going to be Ivanka. She is sharp. She is well-mannered. She is very refined. She's going to be the next person. So in my culture, coming from Korea, a lot of times businesses were passed down to the son, typically the eldest son. I just had a meeting with Samsung, the grandson of Samsung, and this was last week. And I asked him, how difficult was it for your father, because his father, the founder of Samsung, gave the company reins to the third son, not the eldest son, which created a huge family rift, And it still has decidedly separated the family in many factions. But what the father said was, he found the most capable person that he wanted to give it to, not just because he was the eldest son. So even in a culture like Korea, which is very, very hierarchical, things are starting to change a bit. What you already know by diversity, here's some keywords that all of us have heard, right? Race, inclusion, female, sex, age, beliefs, religion, Y-gen, retention. These are all good concepts, and there's nothing wrong with any of these. But I want to ask, is there something more about diversity that we can use outside of HR policies, but rather looking at it from a market perspective where we could strategically align our organizations to meet global demands as an advantage and not as a defensive policy? So let's go to this next slide. Just as a little wake-up test. I know it's early in the morning, but I love doing this wake-up test. You're not allowed to use your smartphones for this test. No smartphones allowed for a second. So let's start with the first one. How many colors are there on a Rubik's Cube? 6, right? Square has 6 sides, 6 different colors, right? 6. Second question, how many individual faces are there on a Rubik's Cube? All right, you're sharps today. You might know the third one, I hope not, but 54, right? There's 9 faces on each side, 6 sides, 6 times 9. The last time I checked, there's 54, right? Now, here's the good one. If anyone guesses this, I've got a 50 Sing dollar. I don't have 100, sorry. I usually use 100 in the US. But I have a $50 Sing bill, okay, for the person that guesses number 3. How many combinations are there on a Rubik's Cube? I would even I'll give you the $50 if you guess within 100. Within 100. How many combinations? Any guesses? I'm sorry? 6 to the power of 54. You're very, very close. But what is that number? Any other guesses? Maybe a million? Billions. Billions. Let's ask the young people, how many combinations? Somebody guess. I'm curious what you would guess. 10 million? Okay, I feel bad. I don't want to keep picking on them. All right, here's the answer. 43 quintillion. 43 quintillion combinations on a Rubik's Cube. And some of you sitting here should be ashamed of yourself because the tiger moms in the room have been telling their kids, why can't you do it faster, right? It's not easy. There's 43 quintillion combinations, right? So do you see the world 3 by 3 in a very simple way, or 6 colors? Or do you see the world where there's so many combinations of people, segmentations, cultures, that we all have to admit to the differences so that we could actually respond to the differences? The other thing that's happening is the world is getting smaller. Even with so many combinations, you look at us all in the room here, it's amazing that we're here in Singapore. We came from all over the world, and we're here talking about an interesting topic. The world is definitely getting smaller because of air travel, the internet, telecommunications. I could actually make one phone call to anyone in the US sitting right here now. Amazing, the world's getting smaller. But at the same time, as the world is getting smaller and the ocean is getting wider because we can get anywhere or get information anywhere, it's also getting very deeper. I'll give you one example. I took an executive from Seattle on a business trip to China and Korea. And so the executive, this is his first time ever being in Asia, actually. And he said, James, give me some tips before we actually go see the host families on how I should act, what I should say. And I said, well, when we go to Korea, we're going to be hosted by a family, and they're going to make us some really good food. And when they make you the food, please just eat everything on your plate. Because it's kind of rude if you don't, because Koreans think that you didn't like it, right? So we went to the host family, and he tried kimchi, he tried the beef, and even the side dishes that he didn't understand what it was, but he said, oh, this is great. And it was perfect. We had a great evening, right? So then we get on a flight to go to Beijing, and we get hosted by another family. And so we're sitting at dinner, and he's confident. He's like, oh, he knows what he's doing now, right? So dish comes out, and he eats everything like a champ, right? And so the lady takes his dish, takes it back into the kitchen, and fills it up again, brings it back, and puts it on his plate, or puts it on in front of his table setting. And he goes, okay, well, I guess I could eat a second serving. So he eats everything like a champ. And then the lady is a little bit perturbed now because she put a lot on. So the lady grabs the dish again, goes back to the kitchen, piles it on again, and I'm not paying attention because we're drinking a lot of baijiu, so I lost track of taking care of him. But as soon as she comes back, I look and I go, wow, he must be hungry. And then it just dawned on me that I told him to eat everything in Korea, right? And finally, the lady went back to the kitchen and he goes, James, I can't eat this. What do I do? I said, his name is Larry. I said, Larry, stop eating it. He goes, you told me I gotta eat everything. I said, that was Korea. He goes, I thought it was an Asia thing. I said, Asia it has a lot of cultures and countries, right? So it's a funny story, but the world is getting wider, but it's still very deep. We have to understand our subcultures. We have to now understand religions in the workplace as well. Those things are actually very, very relevant today. The other thing that's happening is the consumer is getting smarter and smarter. All of you in here now could, in the reach of a pocket into your phones, you could actually look up something like the 43 quintillion and just get it like this. I was at Los Angeles, this was about 2 months ago, and I was checking out a rental car. And I was in line, and there's a very, very long line, and I was like, oh, this kind of sucks, I'm in a rush. But then I saw this very short line of just 2 people, and they had monitors. And so I thought, oh, maybe that's kind of like an auto checkout thing. So I went there and I started working the machine. And basically what happens is someone's face comes on the television screen and you could actually rent your car. I thought, wow, very cool. And as soon as I was about to swipe my credit card, this person taps me on the shoulder and says, sir, you're cutting. I said, I'm sorry, I thought I waited in line. She goes, sir, you shouldn't cut. I go, look, I'm sorry if there's a mistake here, but I was waiting in line here and I thought this was shorter. She said, sir, no one appreciates cutters. Now I'm getting a little upset, right? Because my intention was not to cut. And so I said, look, I'll happily go back in the line, but please don't sit there and just call me someone who's trying to cut. And she said, well, we don't appreciate, people trying to get ahead of the line of other people that have been waiting. I said, look, lady, I get it. I will go back in line. I'll wait. I open up my phone. I tweet how unhappy I am with the service. And I, hashtag the car company name. And I won't mention their name now, but literally 25 seconds later, I get a reply to my tweet, and the car company apologizes profusely and asks me, what happened. So I basically, they say, oh, okay, send me your email, and I could actually, and they gave me some kind of a customer service email. I emailed them right there, and by the time that I got to the line, I got a free car. Consumers are smart now. You cannot fool them and just put a blindfold on them and think that we're going to get away with things. Consumers are very smart. So then we start looking at consumer behavior a bit, right? Because if diversity actually can help you in your globalization efforts and reaching to other consumer segments, then let's look at the history of this, right? And once again, this graph right here is very US specific, but I think it could actually be interesting anyways for you. In the 1940s, the consumer was rooted in what's called economic theory. So the cheaper something was, the higher sales that people would get because it was a utility price. They wanted something to spend on that they could get a value for. Then in the 1950s, what happened was economists realized there was a flaw in the model. And where the flaw came out of were gifts, especially perfume. The higher the price of perfume was, the higher the sales. So they thought there's a flaw in the utility model. So they changed it around to say, oh, okay, sex, fear, hunger, those do drive buying behaviors. And then in the 1960s, business schools were producing their own scholars. John F. Kennedy became the president of the United States and created what's called the Consumer Bill of Rights, which was the first contract between a consumer and a business. And so then what happened was the Consumer Reports was born. Consumers felt, okay, we have power now. We actually have somewhat of a voice. And then in the 1970s, the consumer was a problem solver. They wanted the information, but they couldn't really digest it very well. And then in the 1980s, what happened was we had kind of a recessionary period in the US, and consumers stopped buying as much. But what was interesting was, even though it was slow, more products went into the market because companies thought we just have to add more products and consumers will buy more. In fact, the average number of products in a supermarket in 1981 in the US was 13,000, and by 87 it was 21,000. So you talk about the number of products that were introduced into the market. Then in the 1990s, a huge cultural change happened in the US, immigration. A ton of Asian Americans were built and growing, and the Latino Americans as well. And so instead of the me buying habit, it became the we buying habit. So families sought consultation from each other on what to buy and what to spend their money on. And then in the 2000s, we all know what happened. The millennials. Information right at their fingertips. It's social, right? They don't actually buy anything until they ask their friends now to get advice, feedback. It's actually very smart, right? And they have the tools to do that now. So what happened here was this history of the consumer trends happen, but now marketers have another dilemma. They have to think about, okay, because it's complicated, I have to actually create these segmentations of behavioral, demographic, geographic, psychographics, and look at all these factors into creating a marketing plan. It's not one plan or one marketing campaign that hits everybody, right? Then this happened, globalization. Now this screwed everything up for the marketing team. Now they said, how do we actually market to this segment in this country? And even within the country, there's different segmentation strategies. So it became very difficult for the marketing or the marketer. So globalization added a whole nother dimension to it. And I really like this statement here. To understand diversity is to understand the complexities of human intelligence and consumer behavior. Diversity is not something that says, do we have enough Asians in management? Do we have enough females on our board? When we start thinking about it that way, we go back to the old format of quotas, of programs that are actually not philosophical, but they are a reaction. So getting back to the soul, getting back to the why versus reacting is to understand diversity is to understand the complexities of human intelligence and consumer behavior. Try going to your CEO and saying this one, saying diversity is about being smart and understanding your consumers. And if you're not into that, then I guess we don't need to talk about diversity. That gets a whole nother attention level by C-level executives when you start talking about it this way. I spent about 3 weeks ago, time at a company called Medtronic. It's a global company, one of the biggest medical device companies. And I had a chance to spend 4 hours with their CEO, Omar. And the reason I spent time with them because I wanted to understand why he was doing what he was doing. What he was doing was, instead of saying our employees are all the same, he actually started segmenting his employees. He created a Southeast Asia group, a Northeast Asian group. I mean, this is not politically right. And he created an Eastern European group, a South African group. And he allowed them to have their own conferences, their own meetings. And I said, how's that going? I need to understand the mechanics of that. And what he told me was fascinating. He said, those are the groups that our company wants to target our marketing and sales efforts into. Those are the groups that are going to help us drive market share in those countries, in those continents. He was looking at his workforce as an offensive weapon, not as, oh, are we all in harmony? He's looking at it completely differently. And when CEOs could start looking at their organizations that way, then all of a sudden, it's not about, is this policy fair? It's actually a very, very good strategy. Diversity impacts the corporation. We all know the studies have come out that if you have a more diverse management team, the financial performance actually also follows. But there's something else to this. There's a study done at Cornell, and they looked at basically Fortune 1000 companies that were the best companies to work for minorities. And they did a longitudinal data set analysis to see what was the correlation between financial performance and the level of diversity of their key management. Their key management was dictated by the compensation, not by not by just the position, but by how much they were earning. So the top earners, they took that data set and analyzed the diversity for it. What they found was interesting. In the beginning, the financial performance actually decreased. And you'll see that there's an inflection point at right around 20 to 25%. Most companies quit before they even get there. They say, we tried. We have females now on our team and senior management. We have minorities. We tried and, it didn't really do much. Well, you have to go through that inflection point. And many companies don't have the patience to do that. When you go through that inflection point, you see a huge change in the ROI that that organization can have. So this is a graph that was done by an independent university, Cornell. So you can show this to your executive and say, look, this is why it makes sense. And this is why we need to have the patience for it, not just say, let's get a few on board. Every employee is a consumer. This is another key point that I think executives miss out on. Instead of looking at employees as people who work for the company, look at them as people that buy from the company. Because if the employee is buying from them, then guess what? Their friends are buying from them. One of the things that I find fascinating why companies don't do this more often, they go, we want to get into the mainland China market. Great. What's your strategy? Oh, we're hiring, a great strategy firm. And nothing against, strategy firms. I used to work for one. So they spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars. When in fact, they have 100 Chinese Americans or Chinese people that are working for them that they don't tap into to create the right strategies to go into the mainland China market. Makes no sense to me. It's because, once again, we're not seeing our employees as a strategic offensive weapon, but rather seeing their ethnic backgrounds as just, are they all happy? Is HR happy? Do we have the right policies in place? We need to start looking at it offensively, and that's how you get the attention. Employees need to leverage diversity as active opportunists. So it's not just the executives. Employees also, bottom up, need to go to their directors and senior management and say, look, this is the background that I come from. I am Muslim. I understand how Muslims think. I understand how people that are from my country react when they come to this country, or when our company wants to go in there. We need to be sensitive to X, Y, and Z. We need employees to kind of rise up and say, this is the expertise that I bring outside of their functional expertise. Don't be afraid to leverage your ethnicity, your culture, and say, I am Korean. I know the Korean market. That's the wrong flavor of kimchi to get during that dinner. Don't be afraid to use your background and use that as a strategic asset instead of saying, oh, I just want to fit in like everybody else. I don't believe in fitting in. I don't think that women or men are the same. I don't think that an Asian is the same as a Caucasian. Are we all human beings with equal rights? Absolutely. But are we all the same? No way. There's no way that I look at a female and say they're like me. There's things that they're much better at than I am. And there might be things that I'm much better at than they are. But we never leverage that asset base. In fact, we always say, well, aren't we all the same? Yes, we are all the same. We're human beings. But let's leverage the differences as a strategic asset. Executives need to envision diversity beyond internal and external. The best way to get a CEO's attention is to say, let's grow our market share. You will get their attention so fast. They'll ask you how. Let's do it without costing any money. Okay, now you really got their attention. I'm being a little facetious. Let's leverage all of the segments that we have in our company that's working for us today, create the right focus groups, and actually create strategic plans to test our products into that particular market. We don't do that. It's very strange. It's because we're so politically sensitive. So what I'm saying is color does matter. People say color doesn't matter. And color, by the way, is not just the shade of your skin. Color is your background, your socioeconomic background, your age, your education. We all have different colors, and color does matter. Let's not say it doesn't, right? What do you see here? Do you see a man with a tattoo holding a baby? Or do you see a loving father holding their child? All of us are more comfortable with this one. Much more comfortable with this one. we all have what's called hidden bias. And whether we admit it or not, we do. And by the way, the best way of actually rectifying hidden bias is to actually talk about our hidden bias. In a multicultural place like Singapore, there still are hidden biases. I've met so many people that are from one country in Southeast Asia or Northeast Asia and talk about stereotypes of another country in Southeast Asia or Northeast Asia. I've heard that all day long. Growing up in America, trust me, I've heard so many stereotypes about Asians, it's not even funny. So we have these stereotypes, so let's bring them out instead of holding on to them, but actually talking about them. There was actually a study done with 3 subgroups of babies. It was done by Psychological Science in 2006, showing that even babies have early preferences based on what they're exposed to. The study had 36 infants from 3 groups. White babies raised with white people in Israel, black infants raised among black people in Africa, and black babies raised in a mixed black-white environment. The white babies that were raised in a white environment looked at the pictures of a white face 60% more. The black babies looked at the pictures of about 40% more. The black babies raised in a mixed environment looked at white pictures as well as black pictures exactly the same, 50-50. We have hidden biases from when we were very little. And once again, those biases get reinforced over and over and over, and so therefore, we don't even recognize it anymore. There was a father and a son. They got in a big car accident. And so then what happened was they went to the hospital, and the son had to get surgery, but the father died. And the son was laying on the table, and the surgeon said, I'm really sorry, but I'm just too biased. I can't operate on my own child. Are you confused? It was the mom. Most of us think the surgeon was the dad, so well, if the dad died, how could the dad be on the surgery bed? It was the mom. We have these hidden biases that come up, and we don't even recognize them sometimes, right? I'll kind of end with a story. My time's running out here. But this is a depiction of where we're all very different and unique. But I tried out for this show called The Apprentice. And it's a reality show with Donald Trump. He goes, "You're fired," right? And I was actually not someone that was planning to try out. I was at a mall one day, and I saw people lined up, about 600 people that were dressed like me. And so I thought, oh, this is very interesting. So I went up to the line and said, "I'd like to know what's going on." And I said, "What's going on here?" They said, "Well, this is the casting call for The Apprentice." I said, "You mean the Donald Trump show?" They said, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, I love that show. I watched that one. I watched Dancing with the Stars. I watched Survivor. I love reality shows. I don't watch The Bachelor, though, okay?" And so I asked them, "Do you mind if I try out? Because I think it would be a great dinner story, because it's one of my favorite shows." And they said, "You want to try out just because you could share a dinner story?" I said, "Yeah, why not?" And they said, "Fine. Well, let me ask you a few questions. Do you have a business background? Do you know what you're talking about?" So I told them my background. They go, "Oh, actually not bad." "Okay, go ahead, try out." So I was literally the last person to walk into the casting call my year of 800,000 people. 800,000, that's a lot of people, right? I was the last person wearing jeans and a t-shirt. People looking at me very funny. To make a long story short, this casting process is like a 6-month process. You go through so much to get on that darn show. So I was actually driving on a bridge about 4 months after that casting call. And there's a lot of stuff I had to do in between It's kind of like American Idol. There's this whole step, like process you got to go through each step. But 4 months kind of dragged by. And I was driving, I get a call from a 310 number, which is Los Angeles. And they say, hey, this is Burnett Studios and NBC. Is, James there? I say, yeah, this is James. They go, can you come down to LA in 2 weeks and stay for a full week? I said, sure, I could do that. I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. They said, I'm one of the top 50. So they chose 50 people to come down to LA, and they're choosing 18 people to be on the show. So I thought, okay, my chances are pretty good, but then if you don't make it, it kind of sucks, right? You're right there and you don't make it. So I go down to LA, and for a full week, I'm sequestered in a hotel where they take your cell phone, they tell you when you could eat, they tell you who you could look at, and literally they said, if anyone looks like you, you're not allowed to make eye contact with them. I go, what determines whether they look like me? They said, well, they're gonna be like your age and they're gonna look professional. So you can't even make eye contact with people for a whole week. You meet with doctors, you meet with a psychotherapist, you take this timed IQ test, you take a Navy SEAL mental aptitude test, and you debate these 50 people for the full week. And Donald Trump's sitting right there, Mark Burnett's sitting right there, and they're just watching the whole week how you handle yourself, how quick you are, how much information you know. It was pretty intense. I was stressed out. Last day, it's a Friday. And this is a very tiring week, right? And I knew that this was the last step. So that I walk into this room, and there's about, 9 to 10 people in a semicircle. And there's one chair in the middle. So they asked me to sit down in the chair. So I sit down. And they say, James, we have 50 great people here. And we're only going to choose 17. I said, I thought it was 18. They said, well, we already chose one. I said, okay. We're going to choose 17. Why should we choose you to be on the show when your life's about to change? They said, your life will change. Why should you be on the show? And I knew at that moment, this was like do or die. This was the moment where you say the right words to get that job, to close that deal. But something really strange came out of my mouth. It wasn't the smartest thing to say, but it just came out. I looked at them and I said, I have a question for you. Out of 6 seasons of The Apprentice, how come you guys have never had an Asian guy on the show? The room got really quiet. Really quiet. The next 6 seconds felt like 2 hours for me. I just said, oh my gosh, why did I do that? Like I said, I'm not very politically sensitive. So I just said it, right? Finally, one guy in the corner tips his hat. Says, James, do you want to know the right answer or do you want to hear the real answer? I said, well, I'm obviously here to hear the real answer. He goes, James, this is America. I said, yeah, I noticed. Asian men do not make for good primetime television in America. This is not 1940. We're talking about, we're in the 2000s. This is a major network in America. One of the top 3, NBC. And this guy tells me that. At that moment, something happened to me. I became a diversity advocate at that moment. I was never one before. I'm a startup guy, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a fintech guy. I'm like you. But I became a diversity advocate at that moment because I remember growing up. You guys heard my bio. I remember coming home and tires were slashed at my home saying, go back to your country. I remember kids throwing rocks at me when I walked to school, and my mother said, enough of that, so I'm gonna walk you, and they threw rocks at her. That broke me to see these kids throw rocks at my own mother. So at that moment when that gentleman said, Asian men don't make for good television, it created a reaction in me. So not only did I get on the show, I went all the way to the end. I was a finalist on the show. I made sure that I wasn't the math guy or the guy in the background doing accounting. I made sure that I put out my best personality to show Asian men could be really loud and we could be forefront leaders. This is a personal story of mine of why I'm here today. It's because I care about this deeply. And once enough people care about this and see the strategic value of it, then change will happen. I have hope for all of us, and here's what it is. Aristotle actually came up and said this. Our brains are very smart, very, very well wired. We learn by associative links. What associative links do is they create new realities. So the more that we see a female CEO that's successful, the more that we see a female president, the more that we see minorities that are in positions that we thought, oh, that's only for a Caucasian, that's when our reality changes. How do you change? You change by actually having those subsets exist in real life. And when you do that, our brains get rewired and our new reality becomes diverse. Our new reality becomes a utopia that we thought that it couldn't be achieved. This is a passion of mine, and I challenge each one of you to think about the talk to make it a priority for you too. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So we're going to quickly transition into our next panel session about creating and sustaining a diverse pipeline. But I want to personally thank James for your message because it's quite powerful. And I think affecting change is really about having the hard dialogue and the conversations and bringing it forward. So thank you so much. So Melissa, I'll invite you up to the stage.